Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu withdraws his request for immunity from prosecution just hours before parliamentary proceedings were set to begin. Also, the so-called deal of the century, as US President Donald Trump describes his Middle East peace plan, will be unveiled today at the White House, Palestinians having already rejected the proposal, saying it's overtly pro-Israel. And with numbers of infections almost doubling by the day, the death toll from the new coronavirus now stands at 106, having spread across China and at least 16 other countries. Hello, I'm Annette Young and welcome back to the France 24 newsroom. But first to a developing story this Tuesday emerging from Jerusalem, and Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has withdrawn his request for parliamentary immunity from indictment in 3 looming corruption cases. By doing so, the Israeli leader could find himself formally charged in the coming weeks just before the March election. Local newspapers having reported that Netanyahu is believed to have originally agonised over asking for immunity, as it would have undercut his earlier defence that he will be ultimately found innocent of the charges against him. Iris Makler has more from Jerusalem.
I can tell you that Netanyahu did this via his Facebook page, where he said that the great issues of the moment were the politics, and that his opponents were dealing with this, not realising how historic it was. They were only dealing with his immunity issues. I think what that is code for is that he wasn't going to win. He didn't have the numbers in the parliament. He was going to lose the immunity request that he put there, and that he's taken a strategic decision that it's better for him at the moment not to have to suffer that humiliation, given, as you said, that he was always a little bit ambivalent about this step. But what happens next is not quite clear. It's unprecedented territory. A sitting Israeli Prime Minister has never been charged before, but it does seem that the way is now open for him to be charged any time from tomorrow.
So, Iris, how is this going to impact the upcoming Israeli election?
I think what Benjamin Netanyahu wanted, the reason he went for this immunity, first of all, was so that he wouldn't go to the people as the defendant, Benjamin Netanyahu. Now that he's taken that option off the table for himself, I think he must be looking to the deal of the century, to this political issue, as a distraction. You could hear it from the tone of his Facebook post. The big issues, the historic issues, are the ones he's going to be taking to the election. This corruption allegation, as he says, is something I can deal with later, and he's hoping that that will be the focus of the election and not his personal corruption problems.
And as Iris Makler was saying there, in the meantime, US President Donald Trump is indeed gearing up to unveil a plan that he says is capable of bringing an end to the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. He will be presenting it alongside Netanyahu later today at the White House. The Israeli leader calling the roadmap the opportunity of the century. However, far less convinced are Palestinians who've rejected it as out of hand as being overtly pro-Israel. Nick Rushworth reports.
Donald Trump's long-awaited peace plan for the Middle East could finally be revealed as the US president meets with Benjamin Netanyahu on Monday.
This is a great mission, great responsibility, and great opportunity. I'm full of hope that we can make history.
Both Netanyahu and Israeli opposition leader Benny Gantz have been invited to hold back-to-back meetings with the US president. What Donald Trump has called the deal of the century, however, has little chance of success, with the Palestinian Prime Minister already calling on the international community to boycott the plan. The Palestinians have also pointed out that they were not invited to Washington, along with Gantz and Netanyahu.
The 3 of them should understand that they should come to Ramallah. This is the address for peace. This is the only way for peace. This is the only way if they are serious, if they are looking for stability in the whole region.
The Palestinians have boycotted political dealings with the Trump administration since it reversed decades of U.S. policy when it moved its embassy from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem. They are now threatening to withdraw from key provisions of the Oslo Accord that defines the relationship between Israel and the Palestinian Authority if Trump announces his plan.
And the pressure is on former National Security Advisor John Bolton to testify in President Trump's impeachment trial. Calls for his testimony coming amid claims that the advisor directly linked Trump to a plan to freeze aid to Ukraine in exchange for a political favour. In a forthcoming book, John Bolton's first-hand account contradicts the president's claim that he did nothing wrong in his dealings with Ukraine. Now, some Republicans say they're now open to hearing from witnesses in the Senate trial. Monty Francis tells the story.
They had the weight of authority.
Lawyers for U.S. President Donald Trump have been arguing that no one can directly tie Trump to the holdup of nearly $400 million in military aid for Ukraine in exchange for a personal political favor. But now Trump's own former national security advisor has completely upended that claim. In an upcoming book, John Bolton supports the accusation at the heart of the impeachment investigation that Trump abused his power as president, demanding investigations from Ukraine into a potential 2020 rival, Democrat Joe Biden, and his son, Hunter Biden.
I think it's increasingly likely that other Republicans will join those of us who think we should hear from John Bolton. And whether there are other witnesses and documents, well, that's another matter. But I think John Bolton's relevance to our decision has become increasingly clear.
Just 4 Republicans have to sign on for witnesses to appear in the Senate trial, and at least 3 have already indicated they are now leaning toward that possibility. In addition to Utah Senator Mitt Romney, Susan Collins of Maine and Lisa Murkowski of Alaska have indicated they too want to hear from Bolton. Lamar Alexander of Tennessee is seen as a possible 4th vote. But that move could enable the president's lawyers to call witnesses of their own, including possibly Joe Biden's son, Hunter Biden.
If the Senate needs to secure testimony from John Bolton, then I will say so if I think that's necessary for fairness. But I also have said for weeks, if we call one witness, we're going to call witnesses requested by the president.
Republican leaders had hoped to wrap up the impeachment trial by the end of this week, but that's now in doubt, with the possibility that 1 or more witnesses could testify.
To China now, where the number of victims of that contagious coronavirus has risen to at least 106. That figure including the first recorded death in the capital Beijing and 24 new deaths in Hubei province, where the disease first emerged. 4,500 people have now been infected with the virus, the vast majority being in China. In the meantime, America, France and Japan are making plans to evacuate their citizens out of the worst affected areas. This as Beijing continues to scramble to contain the outbreak. Our correspondent Patrick Fox has more from Beijing.
The focus remains on containment. And one of the things we've been hearing about is this grid management system, essentially asking people from Wuhan to isolate themselves for a period of 14 days. And if they find that anything is wrong, they are meant to report themselves to authorities. That aside, you mentioned a little bit about some of the other efforts beyond extending the holidays. They've also sent in lots more, hundreds more medics into Wuhan to help contain the outbreak and also bring in more supplies. As we know, there's been a real shortage there of things like face masks and goggles. And also, as we know, they are rushing to build these 2 hospitals. Those are meant to house at least 2,000 people. So one has to imagine that the numbers still could rise significantly. Besides that, we're also hearing that charities are being told to funnel donations towards this drive to contain the disease, and that, you know, although people are being told to extend the Lunar New Year holidays, manufacturers of safety gear are actually being told to go back to work early. So there's lots of things going on here, and authorities really trying to do as much as they can to at least slow down the rate of transmission that we're seeing at the moment, which is very worrying indeed.
And this Tuesday, the leader of Hong Kong, Carrie Lam, has been urging all residents of the city to return immediately from the mainland and remain at home for at least 14 days as well. All rail links to mainland China will be cut off beginning Friday, of course, as fears continue to grow about the spread of that virus. And that's it for this edition. Do stay with us here on France 24.